Greetings and salutations. So, um, I will say that you, but the synchronicity with like rereading this right now with my own process has been, it's kind of like, geez, 'cause the reading for today, we're at page 163, and this is family belonging with, the associated attachment styles. And I don't know about you, but um, I've been affected by the passing of Sinead O'Connor in a way that I've never experienced. Um, Feeling impacted by the passing of a celebrity. I'm not really I'm not usually in pop culture that much, and also I wasn't I'm not someone who would have even, like, identified as being a fan of her music, but as the, yeah, but she came up in my formative years, and I think um she represented a cultural phenomenon, actually, like, the exemplification of a woman in a way that I don't know had been done before, and I think in many ways, Madonna is often given the credit for, um, for this kind of courageousness, you know, and that I give her, when I think, like, "Oh, Madonna was one of," and I think, like, I look at Sinead and what she exemplified and what she showed. Um, and I don't know, and so thank you to Mira for showing me the book that she wrote, and been reading that, and so, like, a lot of the books about her family, and so I really recommend the book if you feel called to it. Um, a lot of the book is about her upbringing and her family. And so it's been particularly evocative for me in this way that is really, it's activating, it's validating, and it's actually really, like, a nice experience. In the development of this book, Parinama Method, and the creation of it, my own process did a lot of the revelations of revealing things that were deep inside me. So there isn't that much in terms of, like, shocking things really that surface, but there is opening. There's an increased opening, and anyway, I'm not gonna talk more about my own process. Um, yeah, and also I'm kind of in it right now, so I don't really know that it's, like, really it's, like, the time, yeah, I feel like the time to talk about this stuff, especially in, like, this forum where I'm reading from the book, is probably when I'm a little bit more through it. So, there's that. But, I think, one of the things that it's almost like a suppressed narrative is complicated mothers. Complicated mothers, I mean, you have the Jeanette McCurdy book that came out. Um, there's a lot of complicated mothers. It's like, I think the narrative is, like, that's kind of like like, the mother holds it together, it's familiar, and it does, certainly is happens, but I think all different things, it's like, is this normal? It's like everything happens. There's all sorts of variations. So I'm gonna read. Are you ready? Here's the themes in the fourth hub. So Themes. So, okay, we've just made it through the basics and now we're going to get into like the themes. The basics are just kind of like the sort of like singular aspects, and the themes are kind of where you have like multiple components interfacing and coming together. So, okay, so when we're comfortable with loved ones, we soften, relax, and express ourselves more freely. We can enjoy having our needs being met and can support the people who matter most to us. Belonging, along with how the need for it shapes and transforms us, is a central theme in this hub. Here I discuss some of the fundamental entities of belonging that shape us, including family, society, culture, intimacy, the self, the environment, and the associated behavior patterns and paradoxes we navigate within each of them. Yeah. 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 This one, I will say that for me personally, my self awareness around the importance of belonging. And it's interesting, to me that it's like with belonging, it's not simple. Like, it's not just like, I want to belong. There, tends to be like a particular hunger for an aspect of the belonging, like what in that connection is very specifically fulfilled. And some of that has to do with like debt carried over from earlier hubs. And some of it has to do with what comes next in terms of being seen, and feeling understood. So this is it's kind of like the Rumi, where it's like the beast versus the angel. It's like the thing about belonging is it ties in a lot of the facets. It's not just like I like to belong. It has deeper roots and then I guess foliage that stretch out into the expression of these other really important parts of ourselves. And yeah. hmm So, yeah, I mean, the exploration of belonging and specifically what the fulfillment it provides is worth it's just worthy of exploration in terms of self-awareness, because that need to be connected, so as it to feel safe, because there's a biological what is the term they call it, where it's like it's conservation of a trait that is exhibited in, say, like mammals and animals, of being in groups creating safety, because it's like actually like the sharing of vigilance. So that is there's that, right? And then there's the ability to emotionally attune and to like feel yourself through being connected with someone else. Um, just and to be seen, the cycle, and we'll get into this in the later chapters, but it's like to express ourselves, there's like a return in terms of a validation of just having been seen, and the importance of being seen by people who see the best in you. This goes back to one of the 5 core needs, which is to be seen and delighted in. Yeah. So, well, this, the notion of connection belongs here in this hub, like many things, it has, it's like this is kind of like an organizing principle for, the addressing and contemplation and expansion. So, Yeah. So, family belonging with attachment styles. So, the foundation of our early programming was built through the familial conditions of love and acceptance that frame our worldview and shape our behavior patterns in adulthood. Our early experiences in our families taught us how to behave in relationships. Again, we're born into families and communities full of people with lives already in progress. How we fit into these groups determines how we're treated, which we may perceive as objective and logical because it's the only way we know. Once again, it's the tangle, it's the reflex, the rationalization, the creation of reality. Yet fitting in is entirely subjective. Our parents' ability to provide basic needs, have emotional bandwidth, and manage their own unrealized dreams and aspirations are just some of the factors they were juggling when we were born. Motivational author Louise Hay wrote in You Can Heal Your Life that we are all victims of victims, and if our mother was not taught to love, we would be unable she would be unable to teach us to love. So again, if our mother was not taught to love, she would be unable to teach us to love. And and so, in at the risk of just like sharing like TMI here, um, my mother was so yeah, I don't want to tell her story, but I talk about mine, which was to be raised by someone who was emotionally unregulated. So when feelings of frustration arose in her, that they're just what she didn't have a system, a gating system to process that. She didn't have a contextualizing system to process that. So it was just like an immediate reaction. And I was taught that. So, certainly early in life, and as an on in ongoing is the building of that capacity to create space between an event and my response to it. And especially because of if like of harboring anger, because one of the things is I had that like growing up, this is and being the thing about this Sinead O'Connor has me thinking a lot about this very particular time in my life, and how that like parts that I hid parts of myself. So when I look at how she shaved her head and just really stepped forward and spoke her mind, I think about the fact that I hid parts of myself, but I also think about the parts of myself that would just like eventually come out. And so, I, be like this kind of sweetie pie. And then eventually, and without self-awareness, eventually something would happen where someone would disappoint me or hurt me, somebody that I'd idealized. So I had the tendency to idealize people. And when they fell short, it was a betrayal. And because of my lack of emotional regulation, I would like immediately react, like go to war and cause harm. And, as someone who is like particularly clever and confident and funny, it was, like much harm was caused in this. And it was, and that's one of the things that's confusing. And to go back to like a real central tenet of, of TPM is that was something that made me think that I was a demon. I just thought, oh my God, there's this thing. I can't really trust myself with people because this thing's going to come out. And I don't know what it is. I don't know when it's coming. I just know that it's kind of there, and it's like a sleeping dragon that when awoken will set the world on fire. I mean, yeah. And the thing, and that's just not true. So in the spirit of speaking the truth, it is not true. These things, these beliefs, anything that creates a division within yourself, the sense that there's an internalized enemy, is untrue. There's something in you, this original sin. Once again, that's like, oh, there it is. That's what I really am. And because I didn't know what it was, I couldn't take accountability for it. So yeah, and I think these are the things that, really, as far as like what we're working on here, is like what gets passed down, the complex, when we're going into the depths of these hubs. And this is why we like have to start, or we don't have to, but we start from one and go up, is that to look back and begin to contextualize the impacts of the later hubs on kind of these early capacities being created, and to even form an interest in the development of them. Because it's kind of like first hub, people are like, man, don't really give a shit. Second hub's kind of the same. Third hub, people get a little bit more interested. Fourth hub, people, it starts to be like, okay. But in the fourth hub, it's seeing these foundations that were laid in these early hubs, having these like, seemingly unexplainable aspects of ourselves that we can't understand, simply because they were programmed before we were using logic to like incorporate knowing. Good way to put it. Actually, pat on the back. So it's like, here. Let me give you a better one than that. So just taking, I'm just right now connecting to how much these thinking about the stuff can hurt. How much I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. And that the people that taught us were victims of victims. And what it ultimately travels back to always is war and industrialization and religion. But it could be so far back. It could be so far back that it's like it feels untraceable, and it's like, how on earth could this possibly have made it this far down the line? And it's like, well, because once again we're talking about this victims of victims thing, and that we're coded before conscious evaluation or contextualization. So these patterns of like reflexes and fears of things and like shaming and like these things, it's like, oh, you're like the toddler, is drawn in, it's like, oh, not that person, by the mother. So it's like, do you think that does not become some type of physical learning, shaming, the behaviors of shameworthy, It's like when a child exhibits tactile sensuality to be like, oh my, like, oh, or when, it's like you should be a big boy, no crying, or you should be, a nice girl, don't be so aggressive. This stuff is all, I mean, it's like it feels trite to even talk about sometimes because it's like it's trite because we're talking to something that just sort of like knows it conceptually post programming. I just saw some people ride by on a bicycle and it just looked really nice. Sorry. It's just like, it was like, well, that looks nice and free. This is not, yeah, I know, right? It's kind of like, here. Ding. Mm. Just like, just notice shortness of breath and like breathing in. And how even breathing in these concepts is like, has a very unique quality that like is that really connects in. It's like the constriction of breath and even the shoulders, like the protecting of the heart. There's like don't know if it's still in the book, like but there were, there's kind of like medical, I don't know if I call them studies, but like observations or, like included in studies, the notion that like depression actually has a physical manifestation of shoulders hunching forward as if like wings trying to fold over protecting a heart. I mean, I added the last part, but the thing about the manifestation of hunched over and shortness of breath. Okay, so let's do it. Are we ready? I know this is a tough one. Yeah, I mean, it's really, so I'll say like press pause. One of the things is like being able to say this is enough for right now. At any point. That alone, if you were to press pause and say, I think it's been enough for now, that is expanding the capacity. That is expanding capacity because you're protecting yourself. You're saying it's enough for right now. Versus like, I should be able to get through this. This is conceptual stuff. This is deeper than conceptual. It touches something inside of us that may not have been touched, may be very sensitive to touch. So respecting that and beginning to listen to it. And the thing is, like, once we start listening to that, it begins to trust us. So a lot too is like re-establishing or even establishing trust with ourselves. Yeah. So conditional love. So parents may have fantasies of their children continuing a legacy, of attending schools and joining organizations they consider important, and of gender, what it means to be a boy or a girl. There's also the understandable hope that a child will be agreeable, likable, and easy to raise. These dreams are fine, but the conditional love and support often showered on children as they follow these parental dreams and directions, many mapped before their births, can take a lifetime to reconcile. Children will contemplate and attempt to understand the difference between what's true for themselves as individuals and what's true for their family. In some places, there will be overlap, but in others, they'll be forced to navigate conflict. There are many versions of ways that we behave to gain our parents' favor. And the reality is that families are composed of people from the general population. Their capacity to love you was not a prerequisite for having children. They do the best they can. And even in the best case scenario, their parenting is always going to be less than perfect. And working through manageable struggles makes us strong. Even if we didn't learn to love, this is a capacity that can be nourished, supported, and grown when we give it conscious attention. Yes, 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 yes. And work on it through somatic practices. It's through true belonging and connection that we can reconcile and heal maladaptation from interruptions in all our hubs. Our heartbeat and naturally occurring breath symbolize the enduring commitment our body and life have for us. And conscious breath plays a unique role in restoring dynamic balance and softening holding patterns. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unconditional love. If we did not receive it as children, which is really the only time where we really can't be it's like, especially in the early stages of our development, where our behavior is naturally arising. So to kind of like give and take love as it relates to naturally arising behavior. And then as adults, like we are accountable. So someone can withdraw if we hurt them. Like the idea of unconditional, like it's like, well, you're hurting me or I'm hurting you. So it's like the idea that like unconditional love is for children. So I have confusion around that. I mean, unconditional, and even unconditional positive regard. I mean, the thing about remaining, this kind of nuance about like what it means to sustain connection with somebody throughout vicissitudes of behavior is absolutely part of love. But I don't know that it's honest to say. I mean, you know what the thing is? I'm not going to get into this right now because it's actually like a little, it's nuanced. A lot of this has to do with like what the notion of love is being like showing up and remaining with things even when they're hard. Yeah. So, parents and the members of our childhood households shape how we experience early belonging. How we love ourselves now is how we were loved when we were children. How we were taught to love and early family belonging form attachment patterns that persist throughout adult life. So, Attached, the new science of adult attachment and how it can help you find and keep love, authors Amir Levine and Rachel Heller examine 3 predominant attachment styles as secure, anxious, and avoidant. And one thing I will say is that there's definitely this is one of those things where this is another thing, it's like an organizing principle. So it's like using this to help understand something, using it as a tool, the science, probably like not really there. This is like a kind of soft social science thing that honestly will probably be debunked. Um, And what's happening right now is folks are kind of like elaborating on what these attachment styles are to kind of bucket behavioral styles that we, both exhibit and see in intimate relationships. But yeah, I mean, anything that can help with developing a level of self-awareness and self-acceptance to see these patterns. And as long as it's not the log becoming the alligator, where it becomes something where it's like, here, it's like, oh, I'm a bad one. Yeah, that's the danger with this stuff, and any of this stuff, including TPM, is that it's like there can become this like preference or this idea that there's this idealized state to achieve, where it's like, oh, I want to be the, secure attachment. It's like, yeah, so what? Like, you're not a securely attached person. It's a big fucking deal. like, I mean, it's like, it can be held as something where it's like, okay, this is to see and to navigate against. But I mean, look, so, okay, unconditional love, the love that we have for ourselves, I guess that's probably that's unconditional. Like that love for children and love for yourself. Anything, including these attachment styles, anything that starts to like help develop a fissure where it's like, here's this thing I hate about myself. Here's this thing. It's like, ugh, it's like, no, here's the thing to understand about yourself. It's so different. It's so different. Instead of being like, I just learned something else about myself to like despise and consider like terrible. Instead it being like, I learned something else about myself that helps me understand and soften a belief system, soften a reflex, so I can see the truth about myself, see the inherent innocence. So secure attachment. Are we attended to and seen for our unique needs? And is this attention and positive regard given to us without excessive conditions? Do we know that our mother may be frustrated when we make a mess, but that she still loves us even when she's angry? If we do something embarrassing in public, do our caregivers attune to us and our needs, or does social embarrassment consume them? It's about being lovable and pleasing to our parents when we're good, yet knowing we're loved even when we're misbehaving. Yeah, I did not get that. Oh my God. Certainly not. Maybe from my dad a little bit. Maybe from my dad a little bit, not from my mom. Yeah, don't hate on that. That's like winning the lottery. That's like winning the lottery. It really is. Okay, so yeah. Did you get that? Bye. Like, serious. Why are you reading this? Oh my God. All right, next. Anxious attachment. Children who believe that they deserve love only when their behavior is pleasing to their caregivers are excessively pleasing and highly attuned to a parent's needs, waking up every day believing they're starting with a clean slate, needing to earn love with every action. When love is experienced as highly conditional during childhood, our programming may have us migrate towards people with behavior similar to what we experienced early in life, and may have us act out the patterns of needing to constantly prove ourselves to earn love. And then avoidant attachment style. So this attachment style will be highly protected, yet will want to be saved by a perfect love that's offered without conditions. Yeah. But because perfection is impossible and no adult relationship can exist without conditions, this is a defense that hides a deep feeling of inadequacy. A take it or leave it attitude hides the pain of loneliness and deep disappointment. To create a sense of control, this leads to preemptive abandonment of relationships to avoid feeling abandoned again. This is a person who attempts perfection to win approval. This attachment style uses perfection and high achievement like a magnet to attract people without becoming vulnerable. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is here, and here's another thing that I want to like really emphasize here is that like, and unfortunately, it's just me talking into a screen, but this is also like your reaction to this. Whether it's a it's like it's a contrary view, an additive view, more perspective. This is like for me, this is an area in my own life where there's been a tremendous amount of um like struggle, I guess I would say, a tremendous amount of challenge. So you consider that when I'm reading this, it's like, well, who's she to say, right? Who's anybody? Who's anybody? I mean, this is back, to like what we're doing here is that it's like what feels right to you is so important. This restoration of this connection with ourselves is to say, that doesn't feel great. I don't like that. Or to say this is helpful. It doesn't that part we're just gonna assume is sort of like whatever. But um yeah, it's like what's missing in this? What's incorrect? What could be, like what's I mean, this is, like it's just if there's anything that this and it actually might even be helpful. One of the things that might be helpful in the expansion of capacity and also like what we're trying to do here is if there are parts of this that you fundamentally disagree with, because one of the things that does is that maintains the integrity of your perspective, and it's like almost exercises the ability to go back and be like, okay, I'm not like giving my trust, like and sort of saying, okay, how should I think about this? That restores a sense of going, you know what? This isn't this me. This is always me. It's always originating from my sense in my relationship to like how this makes sense for what feels integral, what feels trust, like what builds trust with myself. That like that might, it's almost like if that's happening. And one of the things that is so, with if we travel back in adaptations and travel forward in these ones, we'll see that that can, someone revealing something, like where it's like the pedestal thing of like, yep, this is it. Or someone like, oh my gosh, everything they say makes perfect sense. Like that kind of starts to, it's like, like loosen the slack a little too much. Like you want to stay kind of alert. You want to stay alert. You want to stay discerning, you know? I mean, that's the danger of cults, is that appeal of like, wow, everything she's saying is really making a lot of sense. And it's like, I mean, this might not be this section value. This might, but this is a good enough a time as any to talk about this, which is that it's like, it's like what relationship does one have to that? Like the thing where it's like, yeah, you know what, up until now and now, and it's like, does that create a sense of like, this is it? Like, I'm done here? Yeah, it's like, oh, the chink in the armor. It's not, there's flaws here. So now how can I trust anything? If there's stuff in here that I don't believe in. Um, yeah. Yeah, it's a good exercise that. It's a good exercise. So it's fun. It's fun. It's really, I will tell you that it is like reading this, especially kind of like into the void here and contemplating this, kind of like doing what I was doing, like I guess. Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's sort of traveling down the hubs in reverse order, which we get into later in chapter 12. But it's kind of like, it wasn't spoken before. Like it was thought, it was envisioned, and now it's kind of like speaking it, and the part of, sort of engaging others and connecting. Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But anyway, this can be hard. It can be sad. The point of orientation is you coming into yourself, you can use breath. One of the things that you can use is putting your hands over your heart, doing the angel wings or butterfly wings, whichever you prefer. Tap, 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 tap to comfort. Feels nice. It really is nice. We'll switch hands. It's weirdly harder. I'm going to go back. Yeah, this is for you. This is for you. This is for you. This is for you. From the inside out. And if it hurts, if it's too much, if it's sad and you need to process, if you need to press pause, if you need to walk away from, however long. If you need to unsubscribe, if you need to, you're like, I can't do this anymore. Just as long as it, look, if that's it, that, well, it's like, I don't want to put that as like a sort of like, if that's it, it's just more like to remain curious and present for yourself and the reactions that you're having, and trusting them and trusting them. Because the biggest, the central element to any of these interrupting factors that go generations back is that they're really about separating ourselves from ourselves, creating this internalized division. And then we see it begin to show up in person to person stuff, but it was always inside. So this is like an act of rebellion, is to do this, is to courageously return to our relationship with ourselves so that we are not ruled by notions that there's like, little gremlins and demons inside the house that we're just always trying to whack-a-mole, keep them in check. Yeah, sure. Sure, there's stuff where you have to kind of give yourself a kick in the ass. Like, absolutely. Absolutely. Permissiveness. This is not like now we become permissive. Everything is phenomenal. It's like, no, we're still accountable. This goes back to the thing about like love and its conditions. It's like we need to be accountable. And the idea that we should expect for somebody to concede their own conditions of their happiness to show us that they can love us, right? I mean, and vice versa, that's like an exercise of trying to find something that it's actually a conflict, like the softening needs to be, mm, mhm. Yeah, sometimes we need a kick in the ass, but it's kind of like the 80-20 rule where it's like it's probably like 20% of the time you need a kick in the ass. But we're like backwards. We're doing like 80% of the time. It's like flipping. The 80-20 rule. It really is. It's like 20% of the time. Maybe you need to be like, all right, we got to show up for this thing. We've got like there's, that's, part of the growth is that it's like, like that's the thing about love is it's like demanding that we stretch ourselves. We go beyond what's sort of just naturally arising. There is pushing against, but like the whole idea that it's like I need a kick in the ass all the time because it's like my hypervigilance, my emotions, suppressing emotions, shame and like yeah, no, nope. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go for now, but thank you. And I wish there was something I could, I feel myself like thinking like, I wish there was something I could do to make this easier for you. But that's antithetical, you have this. It's in you. This deep love, this deep, deep love that's just never given up. You've never given up on you. You're here. You're listening to this. Yeah. All right. Sending you love and appreciation and admiration. And with that, I'll say goodbye.